all, and welcome to the second episode of PSOJ's virtual series, Roadmap to Jamaica 2.0. I am Jackie Sharp, co-chair, along with Jeffrey Hall of the PSOJ Economic Policy Committee, and I will be your moderator today. So starting with a little background, this conversation series is an initiative that seeks to engage local and global leaders on important topics related to boosting private sector investment and driving economic growth in Jamaica, which is a very important focus area for the PSOJ. And these conversations are even more critical now as we battle the onslaught of the pandemic and as we develop the roadmap to recovery. We'd like to recognize and thank our title sponsors for the series, the JMMB Group, as well as Inter-American Development Bank, IDB, both of whom are very strong supporters of our efforts to help build a stronger private sector and economy. We want to recognize Therese Turner-Jones, IDB's General Manager for the Caribbean, for championing those efforts, and we welcome her this morning. Now, this is our second episode in the series. The first one was on tourism recovery, moderated by Jeffrey, with executives from American Airlines, Carnival Cruise Lines, and MPJ, operators of our airport in Montego Bay. It was a very insightful episode with key learnings, and so we encourage you to go on our PSOJ YouTube channel if you haven't seen it yet. So we intend to have two conversations around the whole area of digitalization in our series. The one today will focus on how to get our population digitally connected. How do we close the digital divide? And the second, which will happen later on, will focus on how do we get our people, our businesses, our institutions and public sector to transform and embed digital platforms in their day-to-day operations. So for today, we focus on digital connectivity in Jamaica. Now we're having to have these conversations virtually. This is a new norm, as the pandemic has caused us to radically change the way we operate day to day and forced many of our people, businesses, and events to migrate online. We always knew there was a digital divide, but the pandemic has highlighted the fact that many across the world do not have reliable and affordable connectivity, and Jamaica is no exception. In fact, it has shown that a large percentage of our population have not been able to participate in this new digital economy, and it has reinforced the need to prioritize plans to address this issue as we seek to recover and become a stronger, more resilient country. You'll remember that our Prime Minister, in his speech, swearing-in speech in September, said that the government is committed to closing Jamaica's digital divide and to the creation of what we call Digital Jamaica. And we know that significant efforts are underway to chart that path forward. So this morning, we want to get some perspectives on the importance of internet connectivity to enabling digitalization and modernization of our economy. We want to hear from our current providers about the challenges and possible solutions to achieving desired connectivity. And we want to finally influence the policy discourse in Jamaica around the critical elements of a roadmap to achieving our goals. We have curated a very distinguished panel for today's discussion, and we are extremely pleased to have these special guests with us this morning. Firstly, we have the leaders of the groups that run our two large telecoms operating in Jamaica. We have Denis O'Brien, who is no stranger to many of us. He's a chairman of the Digicel Group, a large mobile network and home entertainment provider with operations in 32 countries across the globe, with Jamaica, of course, having a special place in his heart. We have Inge Smidts, CEO of C&W Communications, also a large service telecoms and entertainment provider with operations in 24 countries in the Caribbean and Latin America. And Inge, we're especially grateful that you're taking some of your vacation time to be with us today. We also have with us Antonio Garcia Zaballos, the lead telecom specialist at IDB, which many of you know is the single largest multilateral contributor to Jamaica. Antonio has extensive experience in the area of broadband connectivity and digitalization. He has worked for the regulator in Spain and at Telefonica, one of the largest telecoms providers in the world, and has a deep knowledge of the Jamaican and regional markets. And we also have with us Mr. Gifford Rankine, General Manager of Group Digital Services at JMMB Group. Again, no stranger to us all, a large financial services group with multifaceted operations in Jamaica and the region. So a stellar panel, and we wholeheartedly thank you for being with us here this morning. We're going to have discussions for about 50 minutes to an hour, after which we will open the floor and give our audience an opportunity to pose questions and get further perspectives. So I want to start off now by asking Antonio to provide some context for our discussions. So Antonio, please tell us, why is connectivity and digitalization are so important to the growth and development of our Jamaican economy, especially in the context that we are a country that derives GDP largely from the services industries, and we are a small nation trying to compete in a global marketplace. Please share your views from the perspective of business impact, economic impact, and socioeconomic impact. At the same time, feel free to share your views on consequences of not achieving digitization and not moving on the roadmap to a digital society. Antonio, I turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Jackie, and it's a real pleasure to be here with you today. As you said, digitalization has come to stay with us. I mean, it is not just a matter of a priority, it's becoming urgent for all the economies and all the societies to become more digital. You know, one of the things that we have observed across the different countries working with the IDB is that it doesn't matter whether we are talking about Mexico, Uruguay, Chile, or El Salvador, all the governments are pushing forward with the digitalization. We realize that becoming more digital has impact not only on reducing the digital gap that is affecting nowadays different parts of the society, schools, hospitals, security, even touristic areas, but also is affecting directly macroeconomic variables such as a contribution to the GDP, a contribution to increasing productivity and competitiveness, and more importantly, contribution to create jobs. Because one of the things that we have observed is that those economies that are more digital, they are much more resilient to particularly the situation that we are facing. So we don't have a choice, Jackie. I mean, or we become digital or we become digital. And we cannot afford as a country and as a society to have people unconnected. And one of the first messages that I want to convey is that, you know, we don't have to blame ourselves. All the countries around the world, even in Finland, and you know, we have a part of the society that are struggling to get connectivity. You know, even here in the US, there are particular areas that they are not connected. I mean, in the case of Jamaica, it's happening exactly the same thing. We have half of the population that doesn't enjoy the benefits of having connectivity, and there's some thoughts that we need to put on top of the table. There's a particular role for the public sector to take actions to support the private efforts and to just get together, public and private, and work just to become those digital service universals for all the Jamaicans and all the economy. So there's no choice, as I said. You know, it's time for us to make a joint effort, the same way as it happens when we were talking about the electricity, that nobody had any doubt that it has to be universal. Nowadays, the provision of digital service has to be universal, no matter where you are, and that's why countries like the United States or Europe are pushing forward, even creating specific funds that are devoted to support the efforts done by the private sector to reach out areas that at this moment in time doesn't enjoy connectivity. I'm sure that we will have time to explore a little bit more the situation in Jamaica.
Okay, thank you, Antonio. Very important. And following on that, you mentioned that Jamaica is not alone in our current situation, but can you give us a perspective on where we stand relative to our peers, other small developing economies, on the level of connectivity? I don't know if there are any connectivity indexes. I'm aware of a global connectivity index, but do you have a sense of where we stand relative to other countries?
Yeah, thank you very much. I don't know if I just may do a very brief presentation. I don't know if all of you can see the screen that I'm sharing now.
Yes, we can see.
Okay, so the situation is a little bit as follows, you know. When we are talking about broadband and access to internet, we have to keep in mind that they're not only mobile, but it's also fixed. And when you just see this graph, you just realize that in terms of fixed broadband penetration, we are facing some challenges. And we cannot forget a future of mobile necessarily pass through having a sound fixed telephony and fixed digital infrastructure. So there is a whole bunch of work that needs to be done in order for the country to spread out fixed infrastructure in such a way that is going to be capable of sustaining the growth in the demand that is coming up from mobile broadband. In addition to that, you know, we just focus on the base of the pyramid, the 40% poorest part of the population. We are having also some problems in terms of affordability. I mean, it's of justice to say that there is a lot of effort to cut the prices, to make them more affordable for everyone, but still, when it's about the 40% poorest population, we are still struggling in terms of affordability. Look, this table is pretty impactful, I would say. You know, when we just have a look at the Network Readiness Index that was published at the end of last year, and very soon we will have a new report, you know, we see that Jamaica is in the position number 78 out of 125 countries analyzed. You know, but the important message that I have here is not just the rank. I mean, that is just, I would say, just a number. The important fact in here is that when you compare the scoring of Jamaica versus the scoring of the top 5, we realize that we are around 35 to 40 points behind those leaders. And the thing is that since those economies are moving forward with digitalization, if we don't continue investing and supporting the efforts of the private sector and working together, public and private, the distance will increase. So as I said, there is no choice but to continue supporting this sector and making it more a priority for the government actions and the different policies that could be defined. In a nutshell, and put it in a very simplistic way, you know, there are some challenges in terms of the demand and the supply. In terms of the demand, we may say that for the 40% poorest population, there is an issue in terms of affordability. One important message as well is digital skills. It is not just a matter of having connectivity, but it's also a matter of making the people being capable of using that technology and that infrastructure that is put at their disposal. So efforts on digital skills is going to be important. And there are some nice experiences that we have been supporting, like the case of Mexico, that is worthy to keep our attention on. Then, you know, there's from the supply side, there are some actions related to increasing the deployment of backbone infrastructure and last mile connectivity to connect the schools, to connect health centers, to connect even police stations. Because as I said, connectivity is not just about providing services to get connected to Facebook or Google. It's about, you know, keeping the society connected. It's about improving the productivity of our economies. So there is a number of policies, intervention, and financial interventions that we may define, and I'm sure that we will have the opportunity with with my fellow panelists to have some discussions around these particular aspects. But I think that there are some challenges in terms of policies, interventions, such as more spectrum up there, such as a proper usage and relationship between the Universal Service Fund and the strategies of digitalization that the country has to have. And also, you know, very important to have a joint efforts with the private sector in terms of a national connectivity strategy. You know, we are very much talking about digital agenda, But the digital agenda means nothing if we don't have a broadband strategy along with. And as part of that, it will be very, very important to have those public-private partnership and an understanding of where all the schools located, the public locations of the different buildings that we want to connect, and just work together with a financial intervention that is, maximizing the impact of technology. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio. Very interesting. As you said, we are going to get into more discussions around the solutions later, but it's great to see where, that we can measure where we are and we can, start to think about where we want to get to. We need to understand what we should be striving for as it relates to connectivity, what success looks like and how it should be measured. So I turn now to Inge to ask, what goals should we set for Jamaica to achieve in the next 5 years as it relates to broadband connectivity to ensure that we can compete effectively and grow our economy and not be left behind, as Antonio said. And I'll also ask, in answering that question, if you could, knowing where we need to get to go, what are the biggest obstacles and challenges to achieving those goals that you see for us here in Jamaica?
Okay. Hey, good morning, everybody. Good morning, Jackie. Good morning, Jamaica. Well, I think a few things Antonio told us, which are absolutely true, is that if you look today at Jamaica, not just Jamaica, I would say the region in particular, our penetration in general, what we call coverage, is just not good enough. And we've seen that year on year on year. And that is one of our, let's say, we as a company, we're really focused on driving that connectivity throughout the entire region, making sure that unserved areas are being served. So if you ask us, what are we focused on? That's what we're focused on. Really making sure that we are really bringing that connectivity to the entity of Jamaica. That should be our goal set. And the way, both on the fixed network as well as on the mobile network. And driving that forward, really looking at KPIs such as coverage, KPIs such as capacity. Our capacity, the usage of capacity, both in mobile networks as fixed networks during COVID, has increased since March with 40% on our fixed network, with 275% on our mobile network. So we have to also continuously not just invest in the coverage, but also in the capacity. So capacity is a second big pillar. Third, I would say adoption. I think we also, Antonio mentioned it. It's not good enough to just have the networks lying out there. If you look today, for example, in Jamaica, we have LTE. Together with Digicel, everybody has LTE. The adoption rate is around 25%, whereas if you compare it with the rest of the region, we're at 102%. So really driving all the technology that is out there, driving the adoption, driving all the, let's say, usage elements that are on the backbone of that connectivity, either mobile or fixed. We can educate our consumers, we can educate the Jamaican population to really use it in the right way. And then last but not least, we need to make sure that the devices which are ready, available on the island are also the ones that are connected to the latest levels of connectivity. And so whenever, let's say, we progress in terms of connectivity like LTE, we need to make sure that we can really follow those. So that would be, look, when we look at our networks, we look at many, many KPIs. But if you really talk about, we want to bring Jamaica to the next level, that are the four big pillars you need to look at. Really the coverage, we need to get much better coverage, mainly in the fixed side, I would say, which we've been doing years after years and years. We connect at least what we call new build. So we're building new homes, at least 20,000 per year. We're investing between 50 to 60 million every single year to get Jamaica connected. And I think together with Digicel, that's what we're trying to do, really bringing that connectivity as a backbone to Jamaica.
Excellent. Thank you, Inge. Denis, can I get your perspective on this?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here this morning, and thank you to our sponsors of this session. I think having this conversation today is an important inflection point, because up until now, the government was going in one direction and the private sector operators were going in another direction. And I think there needs to be a much more detailed conversation between the Jamaican government and all the interested parties and the stakeholders, including ourselves and Flow, But I suppose if we don't change things and move in a new direction, well, then we won't solve the problem. And as Antonia has laid out, you know, Jamaica is middle ranking at best, okay? But the opportunity is to change that. So one of the things that we need to look at is how do we build, you know, if you're trying to create a digital society here in Jamaica, you need to start in the schools. So the tertiary schools, the secondary schools, you know, how do you get tablets into the hands of all students, which has been a topic here every time. I've been here, you know, 5 times since July, and people keep on saying to me, kids are not getting educated because they have no tablets and no internet access. So how does the government quickly work with ourselves and Flow, and maybe other providers, to actually create a situation where we get tablets and connectivity into every school? The second thing is that how do we build a generation of digital kind of kids? You know, one of the ideas that we have is obviously Coder Jodo, which is an organization around the world that, you know, on a Saturday morning, they go into an office, you know, 20, 30 kids, and they learn how to code, they learn to build their own apps, they learn basic programming skills. We've introduced that in, for example, in Samoa. We've 2 centers in Haiti, we've 2 centers in Trinidad. But, you know, how do you get people to say, I'm going to build a career as a app developer or a coder, basically? So, you know, the universities, there's 3 universities, but there's approximately 2,500 year in graduates being produced by these universities, which is not enough. And as I see it, you know, as a kind of an observer of Jamaica over 20 years, is that Jamaica now has the biggest opportunity of any country in the Caribbean to go to the next level. I don't think we as Jamaicans should be satisfied with just BPO jobs. We need to extend the depth of the foreign direct investment in this area to get more highly valued positions, and while at the same time maintaining the BPO sector, which is about $400 million in value. So if you fix the problem at the tertiary school, the secondary school level, the university, Coder Jodo, in terms of training children, well then you know we're going to change the economy. Everybody's going to change the economy if we all adopt, you know, these new ways of doing things. But, you know, you can't turn around to a 70-year-old and say, we want you to become a digital native. You know, there are steps that you go through. So if you then look at the network side, and Antonia put some numbers up, you know, in my estimate, about 50% of people over the age of 7 years of age is using an LTE device, okay? But, you know, what we need is some fiscal changes for the bringing in of low-cost tablets to get children, you know, trained up as such and to become more digital, okay? But also to bringing down the price of devices, which is a very big issue. And what has happened here is that all our industries here in Jamaica are being heavily taxed. But if you take the telecoms industry here, it's super taxation. About 30% of our revenues goes to the government here. So that has to change. There has to be a removal of the cap. In other words, if you want to create deeper and faster networks, you have to remove the cap on spectrum. At the moment, Flow and ourselves are capped. So if the Spectrum Management Agency releases more spectrum, that will improve the footprint and the speeds that people are experiencing today. One thing, you know, there is a little bit of a misconception here, is that, you know, prices here in Jamaica are some of the lowest in the region. So people in Jamaica are paying about 1.3 US cents per gigabit. So that is low cost. So we're not operating in a high cost environment where prices are high. It's just that the coverage that we have in the hinterland of Jamaica is not what it should be. So, you know, companies like obviously Flow have a strategy. We have a strategy, but we've rolled out broadband networks using wireless, high capacity wireless called TD-LTE, and we cover about 35% of people now in Jamaica, and there's more to come on that. And this will obviously substitute fixed line and copper networks, which are much slower as such. So, we have spent about $500 million in the last 6 years. We're spending 18% of revenues on building out networks. But I want to really, if you take all these ingredients and the strength of the education system here, the strength of the government departments, the leadership of the Prime Minister in terms of his acceptance speech only in September, what he said about digital Jamaica, there is all the ingredients here to pull something together. And it should be a plan with only 10 points or 10 objectives, not 50 objectives. I know I come from Ireland where they come up at 50 objectives, but that doesn't work. We need 10 core principles on how we can change things, how we can bring faster networks, how we can stop the divide that is there at the moment, but also really change the Jamaican economy at the same time, because this is the shining beacon of the Caribbean as an economy. There has been a painful process over the last 10 years to create an investment environment. And now, if you look at the stock market here, if you just drive around Kingston, it's extraordinary the changes that I'm witnessing. So, Jamaica is on the cusp of absolute greatness in terms of its economy, but also in terms of its digitization as well, if we come together with a proper plan that is implementable. So the government and the private sector and all the different parties, have a role to play, and particularly the PSOJ. And I'd like to commend you and everybody, Jackie, for bringing us together this morning for this discussion.
Thank you very much, Mario. We got a lot of great insights there. A lot about how we have to deal with devices, look at spectrum, look at taxation. I want to just touch on now through Gifford, what the impact has been on the level of connectivity on his business as he tries to execute on his strategic plans. Banking and financial services is facing a lot of disruption, a very rapid change in the way financial services are delivered. So I wanted to get a perspective from Gifford. How does the level of connectivity and digitization now affect you as a company and also your customers?
Hi, good morning, everybody. Great to be here. And just want to echo the sentiment of all the other panelists that this really is a point of introspection and a great time for us to having this conversation, because the COVID pandemic has really highlighted the digital divide and has caused us to focus on how we will pivot and really achieve Jamaica 2.0. As Jackie mentioned, the financial industry is going through a lot of change, rapid change, disruption all over the world. And when you look at other countries and other markets, we're seeing much more rapid change. Digitally, everything is being pushed digitally. Most people are accessing financial services online via their mobile app. But here in Jamaica, when you have that big digital divide, folks are not able to access their financial services as easily. You know what I mean? People are still going to branches. We saw it actually in COVID when we were doing our remote work, where we were trying to cut down and saying, okay, we're offering less and less services, but realizing that folks were suffering from this digital divide, that we actually still had to man our branches in the same way, because not everyone could do their banking online. Not everyone was close enough to an ATM, because you also need that connectivity to place an ATM in all areas. Another where we were affected in terms of work from home. So your job may be classified as available for working from home, but due to your internet connectivity, you're not able to do a full day's work. You can't connecting to meetings. If your internet is not great, you're going to fall off and not being able to participate as needed. But I want to echo Denis's sentiment that I think it really is a time for change, and through good collaboration between the public and the private sector, that we really can turn this thing around.
Thank you. And everything you're experiencing, we're seeing right here among all our members in the PSOJ as well. So Inge, I want to just turn back to you for a second. And, you know, both yourself and Denis spoke about where we ranked in the level of connectivity and what we need to get to. What would be sort of 2 or 3 key things that we would need to focus on that roadmap to recovery, whether it's government or Jamaica that needs to do something, or the telecoms company, yourselves as providers. You know, Denis mentioned a lot about building out his network, but would love to hear your perspective on what's critical right now in the short term and the long term, 2 to 3 things that we need to build out our networks and get the connectivity to a much wider cross-section of our population.
I think, like Denis calls it, let's start by seeing it's a gigantic opportunity which is ahead of us. And if we take that opportunity in the best way, we're really gonna deliver something. And the first thing I would say, what it really is gonna require is a partnership. The government together with the private sector in a deep way, everywhere in the world where governments came together with the private sector. And you see it happening also here in the region. That's where real, let's say, step changes are being made. So I would say today is a great day to start that partnership in a much deeper way with all of us. And really get around the table, make an action plan like Denis said, not with 20 million things on it, only a few things. We know what we have to do. We know what has to be done. So a deep partnership between the private sector, which could be, let's say, Flow, Digicel, the government, but which could be much broader than that, the banking sector. And we take a few partners, we go and sit around and we really make an action plan where we really put dates and gates and say, hey, this is what we want to achieve as a group. And this is how we're going to do it. I think one example which recently also happened in Puerto Rico, for example, there was a universal service fund, a tender by the government, all operators participated, and there was a clear action plan, dates and gates towards the next 3 years. How are we going to build that connectivity? And it's going to start. So that type of partnership is absolutely crucial. Within that partnership, I think there has to be openness to discuss what has to change, what has to become more agile in order to really drive the volume rather than only the value, which for me is the piece of taxation, which was also mentioned already by Denis, which absolutely we need to look into. Now, today, it's hampering the growth, it's hampering the adoption. And even if you bring it down, you're still gonna get to the same, even a better outcome than what we are today, because the volume will just do the piece of it. So really looking at the taxation. I think for us, thirdly, in the partnership, what we would be looking for is also how can we work in a more agile way together with the governments to get the activities to build quicker and safer. We personally, for sure, on the fixed side of the network, we have a lot of vandalism and security problems. And if you see the amount of money that is going into that part to recover, to, let's say, maintain the safety, keep our networks up. If we would be able to spend all that money just putting more coverage, putting more networks out there, that would be a very great day for Jamaica. So that would be the 3 points. A deep partnership. From that deep partnership towards, let's say, talking about the tax, talking about how can we together make sure that when we build, we can go much quicker and we can go in a much safer way forward.
Excellent. Thank you, Inge.
Thank you.
I'm going to turn now to Antonia to get your perspective as well on some of the key areas that we need to focus on in the roadmap. You've heard Denis, you've heard Inge on their thoughts on what we need to focus on. Just wanted to get your perspective, particularly as it really relates to policy and legislative changes. And you can bring your experience of what you have seen across the world, different countries that have had great success in really moving the needle on the level of connectivity in their countries.
Thank you, Jackie. I have to say, first of all, that this is not even about copy and cutting and pasting experience from outside Jamaica to the case of Jamaica. You know, the first thing that I wanted to say in response to your question is that I'm very, very much excited to be here and listening to the things that I'm listening. working together and having the political will from the government of Jamaica, having all the support, technical, financial, and commitment from the private sector as we are seeing. And now that I also see my colleague Therese having also the support of Multilateral Development Bank, it's like the perfect combination. I mean, if we cannot do the things that we are meant to do to move Jamaica forward at this moment on time, then I have to tell you, there is no future for us. I mean, we have to do it. There's no any other choice. So in response to your question, what I believe is that there are three main areas in which we have to be working from the policy and regulation standpoint. The first one was mentioned by Inge, I think, is the Universal Service Fund. One of the things that I have observed is that there is some sort of a mismatch between the Universal Service Fund activities and program and what we should think about the country strategy as a digital strategy for Jamaica. I think that those two should be aligned and work together in the definition of programs and activities that are aligned and looking forward at universality in terms of the digitalization. The second one is very much related to rights of way and support the deployment. There is a number of assets down there that can be put at the disposal of the sector in order for them to accelerate the deployment and reach out areas that at this moment in time are not enjoying the services of connectivity. And last but not least, and it was also mentioned by Denis, I think that the spectrum is very much a need. I mean, spectrum is the fuel for the successful implementation of programs. I mean, to have, you know, all the frequency blocks that are not being bidded and awarded to the private sector and just keep it them on the pocket is like to have a bunch of cash in the account and not do really anything with that. It's a cost of opportunity for the whole society that we cannot afford. So there's particular actions that need to be done in terms of a spectrum, and the combination of those three, I would say, is like a very powerful tool for the country to move forward. I totally agree that when it's about digitalization, there is a lot of, you know, different concepts and topics that are coming to our minds. And I totally agree that we have to focus on 3 or 4 key areas. If we just diverge very much, we will not be able to put the emphasis and focus on the core activities that are going to make the country move forward.
Thank you very much, Antonio. I want to move to another topic, 5G. We've heard a lot of buzz about 5G as the next paradigm, you know, some of it controversial. How important is it for Jamaica to adopt this new technology, and are we poised for it? What implications does it have for your business? And I'm speaking now particularly to Inge and Denis. And how are you preparing for it? But before you do, for those of us who are not as savvy, please just give us a quick explanation at the start as to what 5G is and what it means for us. I'm going to start with Denis.
Well, you know, obviously technology and capability and speeds are moving faster and faster. So 3G, then 4G, which is LTE, and now 5G, and these networks are being rolled out in Europe and the United States and Japan, Korea, and other countries. So you need more towers, you need greater density of network. In other words, you need more, need more facilities to create a network. It's more likely that 5G would be rolled out in cities, for example, here in Kingston or Mobay, but I don't believe 5G is going to be viable to run in rural areas. But nevertheless, with the development of LTE and fixed LTE, you know, speeds there are, you know, going to be very good anyway. So I think there's more likely to be a very selective way of rolling out networks in 5G. I think the issue here is one of politics, because there are two basically geopolitical players here. There is the American government, which is saying they don't want anybody that's friends of America to buy Chinese equipment. And obviously the Chinese now are a very significant player and have a lot of influence, and probably have more influence than people think in terms of on countries here. And they're saying, well, you know, if this is free trade, this is an open market, people should be able to buy Chinese 5G equipment, and why should we be precluded from that? So I think the rhetoric has been very fraught so far. And we've seen instances in the last 3 or 4 weeks here in Jamaica where, you know, it became a very sensitive public debate. So I think this is a discussion that the operators like Flow and ourselves and other players should have in behind closed doors with the government to find a solution to the problem rather than ventilating it in public. So I think, you know, 5G is coming. It will come in limited coverage areas, and that's the same in the US. They're, you know, all the operators are focused on the bigger cities, New York, Miami, Dallas, LA. They're not doing it in rural areas because there isn't enough viability for them to make that significant investment.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. Inge, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, the only thing I would add to what Dennis has been saying is twofold. One, it is coming. So no matter what, even Jamaica, we need to prepare ourselves together with Jamaica in a very smart way and in a way that it makes sense for everybody, and do that in a partnership again. And like Dennis said, there are debates to be had and discussions to be had very soon. And those have to happen, us together with Digicel, together with the government, in order to enable and in order to ensure that we are as fast as many other, let's say, countries out there, you know, to make sure that Jamaica stays at the forefront of this.
Okay, thank you. Great. All right. Well, I just have one more question before we then move to the question and answer session. And I'm sure, you know, we have a large audience, so we will get lots of questions. But just wanted your perspective since the onslaught of the pandemic. You know, we've seen significant attention and momentum on digitalization by everybody: government, telecoms, private sector, civil society. You know, as was mentioned, we've seen more people working from home, education, primary to tertiary levels being delivered online, government agencies putting their services online, banks trying to get our unbanked population to open accounts for digital payments, and much more. There's now great news about vaccines, and hopefully things will return to some sort of normalcy by perhaps end of 2021. So as we think about and plan for a post-COVID world, how do we build on this momentum and continue to accelerate the efforts to digitalize our economy and not go back to the way that we operated before? Who wants to take that first?
I'll take it. Jackie, can you hear me? Yeah. I think, Jackie, we're not going backwards, we're going forwards, and there's new ways of working, and as part of that, you know, people need reliable service. But the biggest elephant in the room here is the fact that Flow and ourselves and other players have to compete with people who are unregulated. So there is no real difference between a WhatsApp call and a call that goes over the Digicel network, because it's the same experience for the customer. So if they're making a voice call or they're sending a message. So, you know, Facebook is not regulated. So if you take Facebook, they're taking approximately $2.80 for every customer or every Facebook user per month in Jamaica today. They pay no GST at all. They ultimately will wipe out every bit of free media in this country over the next 5 years. So what we have to have is a situation where for like services, there needs to be the same rules and the same contribution to Jamaica. So, you know, there's tens of millions of dollars in advertising, US dollars leaving Jamaica. That money is being sent by advertisers directly to US bank accounts with no GST, no regulatory fees. They don't employ anybody in this country. And whereas the Gleaner, all the radio, AGR, all the people in media and telco operators are competing with somebody that has absolutely no regulation. So as part of the dialogue with the government and with the private sector, this elephant in the room needs to be brought into the tent with the rest of us so that we have an equal footing. And you know, ultimately, the democracy and society is going to be very badly affected in Jamaica over the next 10 years unless this happens. I mean, where everybody is for free speech, but when there's hate speech, misinformation, fake news, and credible operators like the Gleaner and other news services, even Loop like ourselves, if they're putting up news and they're basically, we're charging GST for advertising and they're not, there is something seriously wrong.
Okay. All right, that's a significant challenge, and I'm sure there's no easy answer to it, but it's something that we do need to bring up in our discussions with the government. Inge?
Well, I would take a different angle at this, whereas I completely agree with Denis on this point. The other thing I think we need to do is work on everything we said on schooling, educating our youngsters, making not just the youngsters, I would say schooling youngsters and young entrepreneurs, making sure we do not just provide the connectivity, the networks, but we provide the backbone in enabling these people to really see what a network, what connectivity can bring to their business, can bring to their future. I think we've all around the world have learned what online schooling could mean. You know, Jacqueline, I'm in Belgium for private reasons at this moment in time. My kids are following school online. That's going to be our future. And so we both together with Digicel, with Flow, using this as an opportunity, what Corona and COVID has learned us to really drive that forward. In Jamaica, helping people adopt to what you can all do from an entrepreneurship, from a schooling perspective. That is something which I think we should really harvest as we come out of this pandemic and everything we've learned, and whether that, let's say, translates into making sure people have tablets, and which I think both Digicel and us are doing. It is really going much deeper, and that's again going to that partnership, us together, not just being a provider, but being providers that together with the government and together with the society, we bring the community forward. That's really how we think about doing business in Jamaica and doing business in the region. And I think I've told you the story of we look at Jamaica as an amazing country with a lot of potential and a lot of character, where if it's somewhere gonna happen, it is gonna happen. I think Denis said the same. I completely share that feeling. The Jamaican population has this, in a very positive sense, this hustle on mentality, which every single day, no matter what comes along, they hustle forward. And I think if we as providers can help them on the schooling, on the entrepreneurship, on the back of great networks, you will see something fantastically happening, which you've seen in many parts of the world. So it's really sitting in that, and it's really the opportunities now.
Thank you, Inge. And I've heard that comment as well from the BPO sector about our people and their resilience and their, you know, their excellence at just, you know, doing what they have to do.
Absolutely.
So, yes. Antonio, any comments on how do we make sure we continue in the momentum?
Yes, thank you very much, Jackie. I think that we have talked a lot about diagnostics, but probably it's worth it to spend a little bit of time talking about potential areas or potential solutions. Following up on your question, I would say that there are probably like 4 key areas that we can really have a great impact and intervention. First one, definitely is infrastructure. I think infrastructure, both from the fixed and from the mobile standpoint. I think that we are moving into a situation where it is not just about population coverage, but it's also about geographic coverage. And again, the issue of having a geographic coverage is creating some tensions in terms of the P&L of telecom operators that require some sort of intervention by the public side just to support precisely that objectives. The second one, I agree totally with Inge. I think digital skills. we definitely need to develop specific programs on digital skills. And here I would like just to add one important note: gender. I think gender equality is something that we have to put an emphasis when we are talking about digital skills and how to bring precisely digitalization into the workforce and bringing women into that. The third one is policies, and I think that we have already mentioned a number of them. And in addition to policy, I think that the taxation is definitely one of the key aspects, totally in agreement with Denis, that will support the development, or on the contrary, it could be a major drawback for the sector to develop. So we definitely need to take an action on that. And last but not least, the governance, how we can precisely define the institutionality, the governance model that somehow embrace all those actions by having together the public and the private sector. I would just focus on those four, just those four, but really have a clear strategy for each of them, combining efforts from the private sector, civil society, and of course the government.
Excellent, thank you. Oh, this has been all fantastic. Really, really great insights. I want to give our audience at this point an opportunity to jump in with questions. I'm sure there's a lot that's coming through based on all that has been said earlier. So I'm going to, let's just see the housekeeping. All right. What we're going to do is invite persons to ask questions. They can either use the raise hand feature on chat, and we will acknowledge you and unmute you. You can also put questions in the chat, and we will follow those as well. Okay, so when you come on, please introduce yourself and then raise your question. I'm going to, ask MELANIE SUBRATIE, who wants to ask the first question. Oh, MELANIE, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, I can. I just need some background before I put my video on.
Okay, great.
Hi, everyone. It's MELANIE SUBRATIE. I'm actually from Musson Group, and I'm at the Chamber of Commerce. We're talking about larger technologies such as 5G and all sorts of other, technology. But, from the micro perspective in terms of digitization, I wanted to understand what you felt the impact was of people migrating from what we call banger phones to smartphones, because these still exist in the market. And, right now there is the capacity to be able to convert people. And I think converting them right at this moment could be game changing for Jamaica. Do we have any idea of how many people have these banger phones? And then, maybe there's some data about how this might impact this digital transformation. Because I think it's not just all about tablets, it's also about the handsets as well, because that's what the majority of people are using.
Yeah, I think there's about, MELANIE, as you call them very aptly, about 1 million, maybe 1.1, 1.2 banger phones. It's a great description. I'm going to take that away from this meeting anyway. So obviously the thing that can change is, number one is, if people want to have digital services, they need capacity on their phone. So, people having an 8 gig capacity on their phone is never going to do it in terms of digitization. So people more and more need 24, 32 gigabit phones to enjoy digital services, like, for example, the 8 apps that we just launched in our Prime bundle. So, that is all being driven by what are the costs of importing handsets, which are very, very high. And the government should consider, in my mind, a duty-free waiver for maybe 1 year to get rid of the banger phones and to get everybody on proper smartphones so that they can enjoy digital services. The same goes for tablets as well, and probably laptops as well. And that would be a major kickstart to changing things in a very efficient way. Just 3 things that would change things dramatically.
Yeah, and maybe, hey, Melanie, if I could add, we've run a big project in Jamaica over the last 6 months, which we called Project Rise, where we have a partnership with Google and where we exactly did what you called, we took away let's say the banner phones, and we replaced them by a device, which is a Google device, which is not a smartphone, but an LTE enabled phone, which is all about the voice. And what we learned, we really went into the suburb, let's say the real inner land of Jamaica, stuck to many consumers. And, you know, like always with consumers, you can't just take them from one point directly into the biggest technical space. You need to take them one by one into. And so when we were testing this device, giving it to people and allowing people through the voice function, get the weather, get their favorite music, this was eye-opening. And I think if we, as an organization, up and about, I don't know exactly how many phones we already put it down there in Jamaica, but at least 20 to 30,000 over the last months. And I think if we really do these type of projects, step by step, where we improve and put our consumer up for the future, that's where the real difference is going to be made. But you know, even for myself, when we started the project, going out there, really seeing how people adapt to the phone, it is eye-opening, because sometimes we sit in meeting rooms and we say, oh yeah, let's all get the right devices, the latest iPhone, the latest Samsung, but that might not also always be the case in order to really get the adoption going. And that's one of the big, let's say, elements we learned from the project.
Excellent, thank you. Next question is from Diane Edwards at Jampro. Diane, are you there?
Good morning. Hi, good morning all. Diane from Jampro. Really, I wanted to ask, what are the critical things in the business environment that we would need to change to incentivize more investment in the network? Because I think Inge very clearly, and also Antonio, spoke about expanding the infrastructure, but the infrastructure is an ongoing thing. So we really need to look at what are the critical elements in government policy that would incentivize more investment in the network, and what sort of PPP models, what would that look like, a PPP model that would incentivize that?
Yeah, I'll take that if you don't mind. Thank you very much, Diane. I think the first thing is, you know, probably there needs to be a PPE model for a new backbone, because the existing backbone is woefully unreliable. And what, you know, if you take what happened in St. Lucia, St. Vincent and Grenada, they came up with what was known as a project called CARSIP, where the World Bank and the IFC helped fund the construction of fiber to schools, all the schools in all those three countries, every government building, every fire station, every library. And basically, you know, you have a wholesale digitization of government services in these three countries. So one of the things the Prime Minister mentioned in his speech in September was the fact that Jamaica needs an alternative, a new backbone. And, you know, we would be committed to contributing to the cost of that in a public-private partnership, and I think that would be extremely worthwhile. You know, the second thing obviously is to try and maybe just bring in a very short-term 1-year moratorium on license fees, and also duty-free waivers, so that we can, you know, get tablets into people's hands and to accelerate the construction of broadband networks, particularly on fixed wireless. But also, Inge, probably in your area, and in the right incentives to redo fixed networks as well, to build greater capacity for them. So those are a few things that we could do. And, you know, if the PSOJ was to be the person or the group that would convene such a meeting of all the interested parties that are on this call today, we could, I'm sure, in a morning come up with a 10-point action plan that we could start implementing. provided obviously the government, and I think the government, to be fair, are open-minded in my conversations in terms of creating and participating in these initiatives.
Yeah, if I may add a little bit on Denis' point that I agree with. The first thing, Diane, from the government standpoint, is to have an understanding of what is going on in the country, in the sense that we need to understand where are the telecom infrastructure or other utilities infrastructure, and make sure which percentage of the population of which area of the country at this moment in time remain unconnected. By doing that, they will be able to implement particular policies such as, you know, rights of ways, or such as put at the disposal of telecom operators, for instance, the electricity pipeline and the electricity poles to get and provide additional services in particular areas. So I think that to have an understanding on the infrastructure map standpoint is something that is going to be critical to finalize the strategic plan that they want to put forward. The second thing is precisely in terms of the particular policies. You know, the policies that we need to define just to increase the level of adoption, as Inge was mentioning. It's not just a problem related to the supply, but it's also a problem related to the demand. How we make the people embrace the technology and understand that technology is a tool for improving the quality of their lives, you know. So in this particular sense, the coordination of those actions with the Ministry of Education, with the Ministry of Health, and with the different ministers within the government that has to have a role in terms of digitalization is going to be critical. And there is a number of policies that could be put in place from the different angles of the economy. And last but not least, the spectrum. I mean, I am insisting very much on the spectrum, because the spectrum could be a catalyzer, or it could be a drawback for the deployment of that infrastructure. I mean, again, we do have a very powerful tool as a country, and why we have to hold it, you know, on our pocket without putting at the disposal of the society as such. So particular policies related to improving the availability of that spectrum by means of the industry, and also guaranteeing that the spectrum is managed in efficiency way across the whole country, is something that they should put an emphasis as well.
Okay, thank you. We have a question coming in from Edward Lord. Edward?
Hi, hello to all. How you guys are doing? One of my questions I have for you panels is you guys hear me? Hello?
Yes, we are. Go ahead. Go ahead. We're hearing you.
Yeah. It seems to me there's a few things. I'm going to change up a little bit from my questions that I posted. We have been behind the 8 ball in development. And when I hear Mr. Garcia, you're talking about the understanding the areas that does not have what type of infrastructure. I would think by this point, we would have a great understanding of what we have in terms of infrastructure in the island and how to proceed. Secondly, the competitiveness, it doesn't seem to be there in the island either, because we've been dominated by the same communications companies all these years. So how do we get that creativeness from the wider sector of the world to come in, influence our solutions for the island? You know, I see T-Mobile using stuff like shortwaves and all these various technologies that are out there. Does the technology have to be fixed, hardwire, or can we use just radio waves or something like that? I know there's a myriad of creative solutions, but are we exploring those so that we can get the backbone, get everything up quick and running, you know, to get us moving forward faster than we are at this point? Thank you.
Thank you, Edward. If I may, Jackie and panelists, just jump in on this one. I would like to start by echoing in Denis' point before about the asymmetric regulation that we are facing these days, you know, and this is absolutely true. It's a very tricky thing, but we need to understand that the value chain, when it's about the digital services, change. We are focusing too much on the traditional telecom operators, and there is a whole bunch of stakeholders that are in one way or another participating in that value chain without, in some cases, having specific regulations around that. So I would like to start by saying that we need to understand precisely that in all this ecosystem, there is more than just infrastructure or telecom infrastructure. So there are some other pieces that that we have learned by heart, I would say, because of the change in the consumption pattern. And when it is about the design of those policies and the design of those regulations, we should also pay attention because they will have you know, some impact on the development of that digital ecosystem. So that is one important thing that we need to keep in mind. So it is not just about telecom, but it's about the other stakeholders as well. In addition to that, you know, we need to understand the different type of customers that we do have. I mean, there are heavy users or users that are less you know, less intensive in terms of the usage of the telecom infrastructure. And according to that, you know, we should also define particular actions in such a way that we encourage precisely the provision of all those services in terms of quality and without stressing the existing infrastructure. So I know that all those debates are very, very, very tricky. It's a very tricky question, but at the end of the day, I mean, in one moment or another, we will have to address it. Because one thing that we have to keep in mind is that in order for all this digital ecosystem to really work, we need one very important asset, which is the telecom infrastructure. If we don't have that telecom infrastructure, we can have the most beautiful, you know, ecosystem that we may think of. If you just go to Silicon Valley, you will see that it's a hyper-connected area. So if we don't have that telecom infrastructure that is capable of attending all those demand and changes in the consumption pattern, we will not be able to precisely develop as a country in digital terms. So it will be very important just to keep in mind the changes that is happening there and try to come up with specific actions around this particular topic.
And maybe if I can, adding to the infrastructure, I think both ourselves, but for sure also Digicel, we've been around for many, many years. And we're not just operating in Jamaica, we're operating in the entire world. And so whenever we look at infrastructure, the future of infrastructure, we really look at everything. We owe it to our company, we owe it to the customer to be on the top of our game. And there are lots of people out there that have a lot of ideas about, hey, this is how infrastructure should be coming along. But this is, if we would not be in the industry we are, if we would not force ourselves to be in, let's say, on the top of our game, in order to make sure that we bring that best infrastructure in the best way also to Jamaica. And I can tell you wholeheartedly that I know that both Digicel as well as Flow, backed up with Liberty Latin America, that's absolutely the intent. That's what we're doing.
Okay, thank you. Denis, you wanted to say anything or move to the next question?
I think we move to the next question, but you know, the question, the gentleman asked the question, was kind of inferring that this is not a competitive market. This is a savage market. You know, it's full-blooded on the streets, you know, of every community here in Jamaica, and we're out trying to win business. So are Flow. So I'm sure the members of the PSOJ in all the different sectors, you're in the coffee business, it's a savagely competitive market. You know, you're competing in Japan with other brands from all around the world, other producers. So we live in a world where, you know, there's no cozy relationships anymore. It's full-blooded, and that's the way of the world.
Well said, Dennis. I have a question that we see on the chat. It's from Lisa Lewis. I'm just going to read it out quickly for those who can't see. We have seen tablets in school headlines for many years across administrations. Digital skills is non-negotiable, another pandemic is likely, and we lack the agility to execute this single goal. What has to happen to execute this at scale once and for all? And two, crime is one of our biggest impediments. How can telecoms help us to solve major crimes? 97% have a digital footprint apparently. What big idea has to happen in partnership with telecoms to get big breakthroughs for Jamaica, even if we have to negotiate some privacy issues, example, social partnerships? Who wants to start?
I'm here actually. It's Lisa.
Oh, sorry, Lisa. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. Thank you so much. And congrats to this panel. I think it's one of the most vibrant I've heard. I used to work in cable and wireless, so I know, and I agree with Dennis, it's the most competitive industry. So good luck. It's too big to fail, and I give it full support. The first question, I would just make it simpler. If you had one word to say why we aren't able to execute this, what would that word be? That would just make that answer simple. The four of you.
I would say a true partnership.
Yes, thanks.
Really sitting and really, if all of us have one goal, all the same, and we all really try to help the schools, and we would get there very fast.
Any others?
Thank you. In my case, I would say it would be critical to look for sustainability. It is not just to have like a short-term view, but to whatever solution that we implement, it has to remain sustainable throughout the time.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Dennis?
I agree with both panelists. There is one thing to Lisa, to have just tablets in schools, but if we don't change the curriculum around how we use them and not treat it now as we're only doing it just for the pandemic, but we're now doing, this is a new normal. This is the way forward. This is how we're going to teach kids going forward. I don't think we should ever go back to a 100% face-to-face. We should always have that mixing of, hey, we're using tablets, this is how we're doing it, we're using the devices, and that digital connectivity is going to enable us to do that.
Yes, one word to execute, Dennis?
Yeah, I just quick change in policies. I think, I think Minister Vaz brought fresh thinking to this area. We need to get everything changed really quickly, and this can be done rapidly in a week, 2 weeks, and some of the changes that we spoke about this morning can be immediately implemented.
Absolutely.
You don't need legislation here.
I agree, it's policy. Everything has to be at scale now. And that other question, crime is really, it's so bad in Jamaica on our competitiveness scale. I think it gets a score of 0. So we get no ranking because we're so bad in crime. What more can we get out of telecoms than that partnership? Even if we, stretch some of the privacy issues to solve crime, when it's reported that, the crime today, 97% have a digital footprint. Is there anything in other markets? I don't know. I mean, we just need to use it. We just don't have the feet on the street.
Safe City is a big area now. We just did a deal with the city of San Salvador and El Salvador to create all the technology for a safe city environment. So it can be easily done here in Jamaica. If the government was to put together a tender, I'm sure there'd be many different players who would participate in that. And there's plenty of scope using the best and most modern technology to make a profound difference.
And what is Safe City?
Pardon?
And what is Safe City?
Well, it's a mixture of using digital technology, working with police enforcement and security in terms of cameras. There's a whole slew of different products and services that make up Safe City, and very easy and inexpensive nowadays to implement. Facial recognition is just one area. We've done something like this in St. Lucia now, and it has been hugely successful there for the government.
Yeah, if I may jump in, Lisa, in the particular case of Jamaica, as of today, just 32% of the police stations are connected. So let's say that here we may think about physical security or cyber security. You know, in terms of physical security, one of the first steps will be precisely to improve the connectivity of those police stations and create this network that Denis was mentioning, just in such a way that the police can react rapidly by means of using particular equipment. In terms of cybersecurity, there's a whole story. You know, the bank has also been supporting in the design of a strategy on a strategy on cybersecurity, and even on protection, on a strategy on protection of critical information protection for the country as well, which is another piece of information and another piece of work that needs to be done as well. So when it's about security, we have to have those double view and those two areas of intervention.
Great, thanks. I think we have time for one more question. Al Edwards.
Oh, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good morning, everybody. This question pertains more to getting the population here to buy into a new digital world. If you go back, and this is probably aimed at Denis, and Denis would know this. If you go back to 2014, when Digicel started Loop, for instance, it was revolutionary in the sense that a lot of the traditional media houses said, well, look, this thing isn't going to work, all the rest of it. It has worked. It's one of the major news platforms operating throughout the Caribbean today. Yesterday, it was said that everybody needs an email to access a tablet. And the argument is, well, not many people in Jamaica have an email address. So how quickly, what needs to take place to educate people or to turn the ship towards this digital view of how we should be going forward, how we should be progressing? I mean, the Caribbean, Jamaica in particular, has come from an agrarian society. We've gone to manufacturing, tourism, but is the change too quick? How do we make that change? How do we impress upon people the importance of a digital age and what it can do for both the economy and the society?
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a great question, Al. I think we're well on our way here in Jamaica, and you know, I think as more and more people have a smartphone, people remove their banger phones and get a smartphone, people get on tablets. I think we're well on our way. I mean, I do think that you know newspapers, Loop, and other news providers have their hands tied behind their backs because they're paying local taxes, GCT, and also corporations profit tax. They're employing people, and then Facebook are using everybody's data, you know, millions of people in this country, their data, for purposes that we don't know today. So we need legislation in this area where Facebook join the party and become regulated like everybody else and start contributing their in taxes and everything else to society here in Jamaica. You know, there is a big demand for social services in this country. New health, you know, more spending in health as arising from COVID. The tax take is too narrow. The base of people paying taxes is way too narrow. And basically Google and Facebook and other tech companies need to start funding and contributing to Jamaica's exchequer.
Point. Very good point.
And I would also say from a, let's say, if you really think it through from a consumer point of view, consumers go digital whenever they understand or whenever they see the easiness and the simplicity and the need. I don't think people will go, for example, directly into banking, but people will go through their mobile phone, topping up or through a digital app, and from there could get into the banking system. So sometimes, you know, if we really sit together and we look at the journey of a customer and we go back, why have they not adopted? Because sometimes we ask them to go too quickly to point X, whereas we should take them step by step to point X. And we've seen that happening in many countries where, you know, through mobile, through digital, through mobile digital apps provided by Digicel, provided by Flow, that will bring a cash society through that mobile digital small payments into a banking digital world, and really following the customer journey in order that take the customer by the hand. Sometimes we want to make the jumps too big, and if we slice and dice the jumps, it's going to be 10 times easier, and that's on us together, we as providers, but also we together with everybody in Jamaica.
Like mobile, that's a good point. Mobile money has a big role in creating a more digital society here. But unfortunately, again, policies need to be changed to make that happen as such. But, between 30 and 40% of people in Jamaica are unbanked. That's, that is a pretty startling number. So there needs to be a number of initiatives there which will dramatically increase the uptake of digital banking services.
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. Well, what can I say? This has been an hour and a half of some excellent conversations. I've taken copious notes, which will help us in the PSOJ to guide our deliberations and our discussions with the government and other key stakeholders. I took away some key points of discussion that we're going to, follow up on. The whole issue of a deep partnership with private sector and key stakeholders. The need to make an action plan, a very deliberate action plan, focusing on 3 or 4 key things that, instead of trying to do everything, we just focus on 3 and 4 and execute them well. Policies, putting, investment-friendly policies in place around focusing on volume rather than value, taxation to make devices and plans much more affordable to our population, and allowing our regulated entities to be able to compete effectively with the unregulated entities that Denis spoke about. The issue of vandalism and the losses being incurred by the existing telecoms, and the fact that that those funds could be reinvested in the network. And so we have to really address that problem of vandalism. And, schooling, we spoke a lot about not only giving kids access, but also encouraging them to code, to learn, and become your next set of programmers, and ensuring that they are embedded in this digital society going forward. So, and lots more. I have many notes here. I really, really want to thank our panel for taking the time to come out this morning. It was very engaging. And of course, the series could not have been possible without the kind support of our sponsors, the JMMB Group and IDB Invest. You can rewatch this and future episodes of the PSOJ YouTube channel and follow our LinkedIn page for additional content on the subject. We will have another digital, because we could go on and on this topic, so we will have future discussions around digitalization. But we encourage you to join us again for the next conversation in the series, where we will have another set of experts discussing the issue of Jamaica's declining productivity and the challenges and opportunities that come with us. So thank you again to our very distinguished panel. We really appreciate you taking the time to be with us this morning. And we wish you safe travels, because I know some of you are jumping off. And until then, to our audience, to our PSOJ members, our panel, stay safe and see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please give us your feedback. One housekeeping matter I forgot. Please give us, we have a polling. Just click on the polls that you're seeing on your screen and give us feedbacks as we try to improve on these conversations in our ongoing series. Thank you again. Won't take you too long. And enjoy your day, everybody.